Today we are going to cover everything that you need to know, gear, setting, and editing to take amazing time lapses using your Fujifilm camera. First, let's talk about the gear that you need to take time lapses. Well, obviously you need a camera, a lens, but you will also need a steady tripod to make sure that your camera will not move during the entire shooting process. This is very important because you don't want the frame of your time-lapse to suddenly change, as it will be very noticeable after the editing process. Now let's dive into the settings that are important to set whenever shooting a time-lapse. And here you have to go basically everything manual. First, manual focus, because you don't want your focus to change during any of the shots that you are going to take. Let's say that a car or a person enter your frame in the focus point that you forgot to remove and your focus suddenly change. You want to avoid that because it's very noticeable and it distracts basically the person that is watching your video. Next, exposure. You want to make sure that you control every single parameter of the exposure triangle on your camera. For your ISO, I would first suggest that you set it to the minimal value on your camera. In my case, 125 for the X-T5. When it comes to the aperture, it depends on how much you want in focus. To start, first a middle point on your lens, let's say f4 or f8, depending on the lens. Now, when it comes to shutter speed, well, it depends on the effect that you want to achieve. If you want each of the shots to be super sharp and to have no movement blur, which I personally don't really like when I do time lapses, then you might want to set your shutter speed at more than 1/250th of a second. However, because I want that blur in my images, I usually tend to set my shutter speed between 1/15th or 1/10th of a second. Another setting that is important to disable and that oftentimes people forget is the IBIS and the image stabilization if you have it on your lens. You have to disable those because currently you are using a tripod and you want to make sure that your camera will not make any micro adjustment between the shots. So disable your OIS, whether it's on the lens or in the menu, and also your IBIS of your camera. Next, you also want to set your white balance manually. You don't want it to be on auto mode because the white balance of your scene might change over time. Let's say if you go from a middle of the day to a golden hour setup, the white balance will completely change. So what I would advise you is to first set your white balance to, let's say 5600, which is the white balance of natural daylight. This is a good starting point, and you might want to then explore the other options that you have if you want to give some particular effects to your time lapses. And we are pretty much done for the preliminary settings. Now let's dive into the menus to understand how to set up the interval shooting, which is pretty much the way you want to set up your time lapses. To find your interval shooting menu, go into shooting setting, then go all the way down to the second page with interval timer shooting. Now here you can either choose within camera timer or external timer. For this method, for this tutorial, we will use the camera timer. You can then select the interval at which the camera will take shots, and this really depends on how fast things are moving in your scene. In general, I like to set 1 to 5 second intervals for my shots. However, if things are moving way slower, like let's say a sunset, I usually try to set it around 5 to 10 seconds. When it comes to the number of times you want to take pictures, well, it depends basically on how long you want your video to last. If you want your time-lapse video to last, let's say 10 seconds, and you're creating a video at 24 frames per second, so if you multiply this by 10, which is 240 pictures, you will get 10 seconds of footage. And I think that 10 to 15 seconds of footage is a good standard for a time-lapse. You don't want it to be too long because the process of shooting will be long, and usually a time-lapse doesn't last that long. It is to showcase an evolution within the time or within the people. So I would say 10 to 15 seconds is a good bet. Now, one quick tip that I would give you if you want to make sure that you have no movement from the moment you started to press on the shutter is to, instead of doing 240 shots like we did right now, add an extra 5 to 10 shots to it to make sure that you can remove the first shot where you touch your camera, and that way you will still have enough shots to have your 10-second video. Now you can also set a waiting time, meaning that if you want the time-lapse to start in an hour or in 10 minutes, it's possible to do it. But if you want it to start right now, you just need to set it at 0 and press the OK button. From the moment you press the OK button, the camera will start either waiting, depending on the timer that you set, or it will directly start shooting. Now from this moment, do not touch your camera, do not touch your tripod, and just let it do its thing. And all you have to do after that is to wait for your camera to do the job. Once your camera is done shooting, all that you have to do is to import all these pictures in your editing software, in my case Capture One, and make sure that you apply the same edits to all the pictures. This is very important because you don't want the white balance or the colors to change from one picture to another and have some weird effects that will be very distracting to your viewer. Now I'm going to show you in DaVinci Resolve how to create a simple time-lapse using the pictures that you created. Take all the pictures that you took and import them into your timeline. Next, while all those pictures are selected, I want you to press Command D and press the frame button. And all that you want to do is that you want to assign every single picture to one frame. That way we are going to have the exact duration that we talked about previously in the video. Then all you have to do now in DaVinci Resolve is to basically remove all the gaps in your timeline. So to do so, go into your edit menu, select delete gaps, and you are pretty much done. All you have to do now is to export your video, and that's how you make amazing time lapses using your Fujifilm camera. Thank you for watching today's video. Let me know down in the comment if you have any questions and if you enjoyed it. And if you want to learn about focus stacking and how to do it using your Fujifilm camera, then make sure to watch this video right here. See you there.